Hi, James. Thank you for joining me on the Naughty Bites podcast. How are you today?
I'm really good. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. So, as you know, my podcast is called The Naughty Bites. What's your naughty pleasure?
Oh, you know what? I think as chefs we have so many that and we probably only admit to half of them. So I mean mine is actually I really love a great Chinese takeaway. And it's one of those things that in my house, if we're sort of all feeling a little bit ill, or we just, you know, the weather's horrible outside, or we just want to sort of chill out, we get straight onto the Chinese. And it's funny, we always seem to order the exact same thing no matter how many times we do it. So yeah, it's a Chinese takeaway is my naughty sort of go-to, I think.
And what is your go-to dish when you do order your takeaway?
Well, you know,
I've got to know.
Actually, I say that I always order the same thing, but I think I actually have a range of same things that I always order. So I always have Peking spare ribs.
That's nice.
I always have chicken fried rice. I always have chicken and sweet corn soup, but I have to have loads of extra prawn crackers to dip in it. And I absolutely love crispy shredded beef.
Ooh.
But,
That's nice.
And there's two reasons for that. One is because I'm the only one that likes it. None of the other people in my family.
Oh, that's so good.
You
had to share.
Yeah. Although for some reason my daughter really likes the sauce on the Peking ribs, so I tend to lose half of that. But yeah, she doesn't actually like the ribs, but it's fine. You know, I can live with that.
That's so funny. You've reminded me of something. Whenever we go to the north to see the grandmother, we always buy little pastries, and they're all gluten-free. So I go buy these pastries, and she likes the ones that nobody likes. Pastry with lots of almonds and cream. Nice. And we'd have chocolate and jam. So we keep our pastries on our side. But what she started doing was, she starts to have ours. And then we're like moving the tray away from her. We're like, what are you doing? And she starts taking ours. So we only get half of our dessert. And then knowing that she still has all of her horrible ones that she enjoys and nobody wants to touch. That's something I need to learn.
It's called strategic ordering.
I like that.
I can't say that word very well. Strategic ordering, yes.
We've all got to learn that, definitely. So I want to talk to you about your restaurant and your food.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're like a massive advocate for sustainability. But what I noticed was in research that the younger generations, like, they take photographs of their recipes of their phone, you know, the food that they eat in your restaurant. Mm-hmm. But many of them, food choice is only one of their values. But among that is also diet preferences, overall wellness, sustainability, and animal welfare.
Yeah.
What makes you take inspiration from the region and its unique produce from both forest and sea?
So we've now got 8 restaurants with rooms that span from Cornwall to Kent. So you know, and it's obviously called the Pig Hotels. And for us, the original concept came from the first house that we took on, which is where I am today. We're in Brockenhurst in the New Forest. It's a little bit wet and soggy outside, but it's quite a nice place to be. And the original house came with this incredible wall kitchen garden. So the original idea was to try and run the house in a similar way to how it used to run back in the day. Now, the Queen Mother's family used to own this house, and they say it's where the Queen Mother's cousin, Sir Conan Doyle, actually wrote Sherlock Holmes. Although there's quite a few places that also say that. So we're 50-50 on that, but it's quite a nice little story. But obviously it came with this wall garden. It came with a few acres of land. So, you know, they would have had a wall kitchen gardener. They would have had a forager. They would have used local produce that was delivered to the house. They would have had animals on the property. They would have used the most out of the area that they lived in and really valued and supported the community. So that was the original plan. The original plan was to try and bring that whole ethos back to life. Now, when we started doing this, I mean, it's probably I think it's 13, 14 years ago we started doing this. And it was a new sort of idea. I mean, there was only a few people in the country that were actually using these walled kitchen gardens, because most houses of this size would have had a walled kitchen garden. It was a way of life for that house to exist. So, you know, places like the Manoir, you know, Raymond Blanc had his garden, which we obviously knew about. And there was a few other little places which were utilizing produce. But there was also a lot of places at that time that were saying that they were using local produce and not actually using local produce.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a buzzword. People were saying, this is local. Okay, well, where's it from? Dorset. Well, Dorset's a massive place.
Yeah.
How local is local? That was the question. So what we wanted to do was basically do that. So we started up, we opened the first hotel, and it went crazy. We won the BA High Life Award alongside Heston, and we won the first ever most sustainable restaurant award in the UK. We won that actually 2 years in a row with the SRA.
That's amazing.
We got put in the top 100 restaurants in the country for 5 years in a row, and we could tell that people really were interested in what we were doing. And we didn't set out to be sustainable. We sort of slotted into this sustainability bracket. So then obviously we moved that forward. And the one thing we wanted to do was make sure that we were completely transparent on what we were doing. So on the back of the menu, I don't know if we've got one. Yeah, here we go. So on the back of the menu, we obviously have our menu with all of our dishes on it, but on the back we have an illustration on all of our producers, where they're from, from within this 25-mile radius. And then at the top, we also talk about our smokehouse, our kitchen garden, where we source our beef from, which farms we source them from, our garden polytunnels, our fruit cages, all about our animals, down to where our water comes from, our sustainability, zero carbon footprint on that, and our mushroom house. So what we want to do within just them sitting down is for people to understand our true commitment to what we do, and that's sort of it. Well,
that's amazing, because millennials are chasing this now, like you said, and I've come across this from quite a few of my podcasts, that sustainability is a buzzword now. People say it but don't actually understand the concept of it and how broad a subject it is, and the fact that you, as well as other chefs, are really holding true to it is fantastic, and people are following this sort of lifestyle change, and I think it's amazing that you're illustrating that in their menu, because many people are like, what is actual sustainability? How are you sustainable? And I think illustrating it with simple language just really helps them.
And I think that was our sort of stance in the early days, because for me, I grew up in this area. I lived and worked in London for 13 years. I was head chef at Soho House in New York. I was in New York for quite a long time. When I came back to this area, I had a very you grow up in an area, you have that sort of love, for that area, and you'll always say you're from that area, even though maybe you've lived away longer than you've lived in, that time. And I had that sort of passion for this area, the New Forest, the South Coast, Dorset and Hampshire was the place where if you said where are you from, I said from Christchurch. And so when I came back, I had this kind of responsibility that I felt that I needed to kind of show the incredible producers and produce that are from this area, because it really is one. Nowadays there's actually all over the country. As we all know, artisan produce has gone insane, but rewind 14 years, you had to really search these guys out. There wasn't really a place where you could just go and find. There was a few farm shops, but nothing that was on the scale that is now. So it became a labor of love, and actually moving on from that, this now kind of this whole philosophy kind of just automatically slides into place. We're now focusing on things like eradicating cling film, using no blue roll. How do we use the best eco-friendly chemicals that we can, because obviously it's a commercial kitchen. We have to clean. There's so many different things now that we can focus on, because we have this reputation of local producers. Instead of having to go out and actually search these guys out, when they're now coming to us, which is absolutely brilliant. It's a fantastic way.
That's incredible. That's really incredible. So when you've taken on this responsibility to promote and protect heritage, like food, traditional foods, what typical foods from the UK are your favorite, and do you hold true to the traditional way of making them?
So that's quite an interesting question. So I grew up in a household where half my family was Italian, half my family were British. So for me, I used and the thing is, I know, yeah, mad. No. So it's one of those kind of things that yeah, I grew up on my mum's side going to, because it's always your grandparents. It's your grandparents' food, because your parents' food you eat day in, day out. You say, yeah, it's great. You know, it's those special times for me that I used to go see my grandparents. So with my nonna, I go there, you know, I'd have the best pasta, best risottos. You know, she'd do some really classic, like, you know, osso buco, or she'd do really sort of like traditional Italian dishes. And then my nan, who obviously on my dad's side, she's like post-war era, you know, lots of like pork pies and fish and chips, and you know, we'd have like she actually used to do macaroni cheese, which was nothing like my nonna used to do, but was, I thought, and I probably shouldn't say this, was probably, you know, better because it's different. She used to finish it under the salamander and get that really lovely crispy cheesy top with slices of tomato, you know, where it's like if you ate it too early, you take the skin on the roof of your mouth off. You know, you have to be really careful. But it was, you know, I think that for me, you know, I have this kind. I mean, my style, we call it modern British. So modern British is basically, you know, an amalgamation of really classic British dishes mixed in with European influence. So, for example, we may have, you know, a mushroom risotto on the menu, but it's with ceps that are foraged locally, or wild mushrooms, or mushrooms that we've grown from a mushroom house. Or we may have something like skate wing with a beurre noisette, which is a nod towards the classic French dish. But then we make our own pork pies, and we make our own crackling. We make all of these sort of really classic and traditional British dishes as well. So in answer to your question, I really love a fantastic this time of year. Bear in mind it's raining. Okay, it's just starting to get cold here in the New Forest. I love a game pie with really crispy mashed potato top and some buttered Cavolo Nero kale on the side.
Okay, you've just won me over by pie. I love pie. Like any form of pie, I'm there. That sounds really, really good.
But for this time of year, it's got to be. And also, game is a big thing. You know, for me, it's the ultimate free range product. You know, game is something that's lived its life in a woodland or in a, you know, in the wild, and it's really good for you. It's high in selenium, good for the brain, and low in fat, and it's just, for me, it's the perfect meat. So we focus quite heavily on that as well in the restaurants.
That leads to my next question.
Okay.
Okay. So these are like British ingredients, okay, and then local to you as well. Chefs sometimes provide a story about their dish, its roots to British history. You raise interest in where food comes from. How do you do this? And do you do this through your work as an ambassador, your restaurant, or your workshops?
I think all of the above, really. I think that, you know, for us, you know, we want our customers to fully understand the amount of work or the life or the way that their product on the plate has been produced, grown, or raised. And I think that, you know, the only way to get that information out there is through standing behind the things that you believe in, like being an ambassador. You have to tell people about what you do. So the workshops and the stuff that I do with the Royal Academy, and like, you know, the Chef's Adopter School program, teaching young kids, that all for me has to give the right knowledge and awareness to people so that they can make the right educated decisions on the food that they're eating. And, you know, I'm a firm believer that you are what you eat. Okay. And if you eat products that you understand where they've come from, the life that they've had, and the reasons why you eat it, then it's a win-win. I mean, you know, I always say to my kids, you know, we go to the shops, and sometimes, you know, we usually go to butchers, but if we go to a supermarket and they pick something up, like, I don't know, like these really cheap, like little pork, you know, meatballs or whatever, and I say, you know, think about the life that pig's probably had. You know, if it's that cheap, it hasn't had a, you know.
What did they say?
Well, I think as children, I mean, they're not tiny, you know, they're sort of in their teens, but, you know, my kids have grown up as me. They shoot, you know, we kind of, you know, we eat what we get, and it's kind of become for them, it's a way of life, and it's how we've always kind of worked. I mean, I had venison stew last night that I cooked for my kids with mashed potato from a roe deer that I'd shot recently, and we've come to the end. We're on to the diced part of it now, so it's now with the stews. But it's, you know, it's about even sort of trying to make them understand that, you know, you need to look at a product and understand what life it's had, and why it's so cheap. You know, there's always a reason why cheap meat maybe isn't as good as something that you find in a butcher's shop, because in a butcher's shop they're sourcing it straight from the farm. They know the farmer, you know, they're hanging it in a chiller, they're respecting the products. It's not gone to this huge kind of, you know, processing factory to get minced up and put into little plastic packets. And you know, I think that it's a tricky situation, because everybody's got a price point and everybody's got to, you know, got to eat. But I think that, you know, we focus a lot on plant-based food these days, and I think sometimes it's too cut and dry. You know, food is food. Some days I'll eat meat, some days I won't eat meat. Some days I'll have animal products, sometimes I won't have dairy products. You know, sometimes all I want is a really amazing bit of pasta with some butter and capers. Someday I want a steak. You know, I think people need to sort of stop putting labels on things and just be really sort of conscientious and understand where their food comes from, so they can make better choices on what they're eating.
Do you think that's changing now in the UK?
I think going back sort of 5 years, everybody wanted to have a badge. You know, I'm a vegetarian, I'm dairy free, I'm a vegan, you know, I'm a pescatarian, and if it's for health reasons, then 100%. I mean, you know, we've got a lot of friends and family that are allergic to shellfish and stuff, and you have to take those sort of things really seriously. But I think when it comes to personal choice, I think that there's a lot of stuff in the media which promotes maybe a certain way of eating that people don't fully understand. And I think that there's good practices in food and bad practices in food all around the world. And you know, most recently, I've actually met quite a few younger people who you know, they were vegan, and I said to them, you know, do you think you'd ever eat meat again? And they say, oh well, I actually do, as long as I know where the meat's from or if it's game. And I said, so you're not vegan? And they're like, well, I am, but
no, it's a flexitarian. It's a new term I've heard of, called a flexitarian or something. And I was like, who thought that out?
Exactly. Or as I would say it, just someone who eats food, who enjoys food, who wants to know where it's come from. And I think that's you know, I think we're sort of what we're coming to is we're going back to the original thing where, you know, talking about grandparents. You know, my nan, I mean, you know, post-war, I mean, you know, they went through the whole food ration things. They couldn't eat meat every day. Meat was a real special occasion thing. You know, you know, you'd have a salad for lunch. You know, you might have, you know, some pasta for dinner, or you'd have a risotto for lunch, and you'd have some polenta. You know, it was, you know, it was a way of getting sustenance and really good tasty food out of something that you didn't have a lot of money to buy. And you know, I think nowadays, because we're extremely lucky, you know, a lot of people think they haven't had a meal unless they've had meat in it, you know, if they're carnivores. And I just think, you know, we kind of need to reevaluate the way that we're sort of looking at food. And I don't think it's right to put these sort of badges on it. But you know, I going back to your question, I think it's definitely changing. I think that people are a lot more educated now in understanding food and being able to make the right choices. And I think people are actually doing more research, and we're finding that when our guests do come in and they see our menu, you know, they love that story of the product. You know, we tell people that story. They know where their cow's been raised. They know, you know, where the fish has been caught. I mean, Bert, you know, our fisherman, I mean, he sends us videos of him actually pulling his little catch, his own tiny little boat, bit of banging drum and bass, you know, going on in the background. And it's
oh
brilliant.
My goodness,
you know,
that's incredible.
But that's the relationship, you see. Yeah.
But that's really good that you have that relationship as well with your suppliers as well, because, you know, you kind of practice what you're preaching, sort of thing, in terms of who you source from. But exactly. It's curious to say that, because, you know, I am from the UK, but I have been living away for a very long time. Now I can actually say I'm from Leicester, because, you know, Leicester City football made it on whatever it was, like, I don't know, that football stuff, which I don't really know much about, but the put on the map, whatever it was. So like, it was really funny, because like here, if you want to eat out, you will only get pork, because pork is what we get in the south of Spain. But if you want beef, everyone knows you go to the north. But people will not order beef because they know it's traveled a long way. It's not going to be as tasty as if you were having on the north coast. And people are so mindful and conscious but they don't label it. That's what I've noticed. They don't label it because people here are so regional in what they eat that they do buy from their local area or within their province. And I think that's really good because children are also following in the footsteps of their parents and their grandparents.
Yeah,
you know, and it's good.
And I agree. And I think the biggest issue we have here is the element of convenience, you know, and I found this as well when I was in America. You know, it's convenient to drive to a supermarket, just buy everything there. You've got it there for the week and you don't have to worry. Whereas, you know, I think in places, you know, like markets or in European countries and stuff, it's a way of life, isn't it? You go to the market, you buy the product, it's from a local producer, and that's the way that you eat. So I think that, you know, it's a tricky thing, and it is. I don't want to go into the death of the high street, but you know, it's something that I'm very passionate about. But yeah, I mean, going back to producers, I mean, we actually went to see a farmer called Tom Hordle yesterday in the New Forest, and he's the only farmer where his cows actually forage on the New Forest wild all year round, and then he brings them in, he finishes them, and that's where we buy our beef from. And actually, this is the first year we've sent our pigs out to pannage. So we have meat pigs here at the pig, and we have commoners' rights because it's an old house. So every year, people with commoners' rights send their pigs out to eat all the acorns. Now, there's two reasons for that. One is because, well, you know, Iberico pork.
Yeah,
you know,
I was going to say that.
Iberico, so it's a bit like that. It's not quite as refined as that, but it's basically pigs that have eaten acorns and they have that flavour. So it's delicious pork. But also in the New Forest, we have New Forest ponies. Now, New Forest ponies, they're wild. They go all over. Well, they're not wild. They're owned by people, but they're free to roam. Okay. And they're the most beautiful things, but they're stupid because they eat the acorns and they poison themselves and they die. So the pigs were let out a month before the horses to hoover up all the acorns, so that when the horses went out, there was less fatalities of the horses. Fast forward 100 years, now they get knocked over by cars, but that is also something which is getting sort of sorted out. So it is getting a lot better. But the plus side is that we get all this lovely pork, which has got a fantastic flavour, and we do things like turn it into charcuterie, and we obviously serve it on the menu and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, it's when you find out regional things like that that's happening in the UK, you just think, well, actually, you know, it's not a million miles away from what they're doing in Europe, but we're not selling it to a supermarket. So people have to have a little bit of kind of, what's the word, initiative to go out there and find it, or go online and Google, you know, where they can buy it. And it is becoming more, you know, we're starting to get emails now every year saying, when will Panish pork be on your menu? So, you know, we did a TV show actually with Fred Sirix and Chris Bavin on BBC a couple of years ago on it. So it's also that has sort of educated people as well on it. So so it's definitely coming into its own. We just need more pig farmers now to put more pigs out on the forest, because this year's been a bumper crop and we've actually had some deaths of horses already from acorns. It's mad.
Oh, God. So you mentioned before, we are what we eat.
Yeah.
And that's actually the start of my next question.
Okay.
What we eat and how we eat it is central to our sense of identity and belonging.
Yeah.
Food and its traditions affirm who we are and who we're not. However, curiosity, travel, migration have throughout the centuries have ensured that traditions continuously change.
Yeah.
Our local cuisines and national identities are constantly evolving through the discovery and integration of new ingredients and flavors. What would you say is your definition of British food?
What, now? Or back then?
Now. I would say now.
I think that British food is one of the most exciting kind of styles you know, out there. I mean, I was out with friends the other week and they said to me, what's your top 5 cuisines?
Ooh.
And you're like,
it's hard to choose.
Yeah, I mean, one of them said, "Oh, Japanese, Spanish, and you know, French." And then I said, "Well, what about British?" And then everybody was like, "Yeah, like, of course, like, you know, I mean, how many times do you go for fish and chips? You know, at least, I'd have fish and chips like once a month. Yeah, how many times do you sort of like, you know, have something which you class as a really traditional, like a pork pie, or you know, say you know, a game pie, or say bangers and mash, or say, you know, kidneys on toast. I mean, maybe not kidneys on toast.
I love kidneys.
I was just watching it go out now, actually, on the pass. I'm sat next to
I love offal.
Yeah, but
So
like
nice.
braised beef, for example, liver and onions, all those dishes which, you know, you just name that I had as a kid, you know, with my nan, and I love that sort of style, but you don't see so much anymore. And I think they are kind of like dishes of what's the word? Nostalgia.
Yeah.
To a certain extent. You know, it's those kind of dishes. I mean, I'm in my sort of early 40s, and for me, you know, those dishes were kind of staple, you know, liver and bangers and mash, and you know, all of those sort of dishes, which now probably I wonder how many people actually cooking those at home. But if you went out to a pub or a restaurant or a hotel and you saw those on the menu, you'd order them because
100%.
you haven't seen them, you know. So I think the style of British food has gone from us being this kind of joke back in the 70s. You know, the French always used to make that joke about prawn cocktails and whatever, you know, which actually I still love a prawn cocktail.
I like prawn sandwich. Oh God.
I'm not, you know, I'm a sucker for Mary Rose sauce, to be honest. But you know, it's one of those, you know, I think we've gone from that to kind of like fast forward to sort of like the 80s, obviously Marquette Pierre White, you know, those kind of like slightly rock star French sort of influenced British dishes that really kind of like blew loads of places out the water, started to get recognition, and really sort of started to put Britain on the map. You know, people like the Roux brothers, people like, you know, Brian Turner, you know, all those sort of like guys of that era. Then fast forward to their protégés, people like, you know, Tim Hughes at Le Caprice and Jay Sheeky's and Elliot Ketley, you know, and all those sort of Mark Hicks, you know, these guys that started coming out of that era that really started honing in on the sort of modern British kind of like fusion style. You know, Jeff and Chris Galvin, I put in that sort of era. And then, you know, the other side of that, which I'd probably put myself in, you know, I'm a product of you know, Tim Hughes, of Caprice and Sheiky's, and Elliot, who were obviously from Marco's era. And it's sort of, you can see the sort of natural progression. I think that, you know, we've got to a stage now where British food is super exciting. I mean, we've got such a great mix of Michelin stars and non-Michelin stars, to sustainable places, to just really fun, crazy, whack, you know, like Heston and you know, Simon Rogan and all these guys, and Claire Smith, and people that are taking food to another level that, you know, back in the day only places like El Bulli were doing, or you know, the guys out in Scandinavia. And I think we've really hit this kind of melting pot of exciting food, and it all stems from the classics. You know, a lot of the stuff that we're doing now, still you can relate back to those classic kind of dishes from, you know, Escoffier's time. I mean, people are still using classic sauces, but we found really interesting, innovative ways to make food, and on the backbone of that is also working with the producers and focusing on how we actually make it a sustainable product. And it's really quite incredible the journey that food's gone over the past like 25, 30 years.
But it's really curious to say that, because I think for me, I love my pies, my stews. My mum was from Lancashire, so I was raised up on the hot pots and Yorkshire puddings, or like some of the different, but like all that sort of hot, steamy food, I've got a real bad weakness for. But when I explain this to people over here, they're like, no, all they have in their head is fish and chips, and I'm like, you haven't been to the lakes or to the peaks or to the southwest or whatever, or even Scotland, where you can have real food. And they're like, and they're so dismissive of it because of this idea they have that we eat rubbish food. But when you explain that we eat seasonal or this game or whatever, they're not interested. It's such a shame, because I think food from the UK is so good, but we also have twists on it because of our history. And I think it's such a shame that no one really wants to know it or understand it, or the bit.
I know. I also think it's because people are super proud of their own regions, and I think that I think that especially like in, I mean, I'm going to say something now. It's going to be. I mean, I went to France recently, and I had some of the worst food I've ever had, and then I went back actually, and I had some of the best food that I've ever had. And I think it's one of those things where, you know, people will be super proud of where they are. I mean, the Spanish and all those guys are mega proud of their areas. And as you said, you know, it's all about that local thing. But I think when people come to England, as we know, there's some places where you're gonna have an amazing meal, and there's some places where they're gonna stick it in a microwave. And I think that because we sort of, you know, like I said, it's only been since like the late 70s that we've started having this real kind of like, you know, trajectory up on our sort of style of cuisine and our sort of level of quality. I think that people that come over maybe for a week or 5 days as a little holiday, I don't think they probably go to the, you know, that they may probably make poor choices of where they've eaten, which doesn't put us in the right light. And I think that, you know, it's a tricky one, and I think it's one of those, wherever you go, you're gonna have good restaurants, you're gonna have bad restaurants. And I think that when I go abroad, I look and see where I'm going to eat. I really do, because I'm a chef, you know, I do a bit of research. I really want to make sure that I maximize my trip and maximize my experience while I'm out there. But you know, if you're Joe Blogs, food isn't really your passion, you know, maybe you're in something else, you know, you wouldn't do that. So you say you're walking down the street and you pop into, I don't know, a Weathers or some, you know, or whatever it is, and you order a dish and it's come straight out the microwave with a pile of chips. I mean, you're going to go home thinking exactly the same thing as what you heard from the 70s. And I think that's the sort of thing. And it is difficult, but I think the good thing is that there's far more good places now to choose from. I mean, most towns, every city has now really good restaurants with really good kind of focus on food, and I think, you know, that's something to really be proud of. And it will take time for people to change their mind, but you know, it will get there. Fast forward another 10 years.
I hope so, because I love vegan food.
Yeah,
I definitely, because like when I told people, like, have you ever tried a butter pie? And they're like, it's a pie with butter. I went, no, it's potatoes and thin layers and crispy pastry. And they look at me like, that's not food. And I'm like, it is. It's so nice. But a lot of people don't make it anymore, which is such a shame. I should learn to make it, but it's better when you buy it.
You should be promoting British food over there.
Like, butter pie, they'll look at me saying, go home. Honestly, but it's a shame. I do love stuff like that. So what inspires you to continue raising interest in where food comes from and how it tastes?
I think it goes back to that whole kind of thing with my grandparents. You know, my parents were avid cooks. I mean, my dad's, he's actually got a chef qualification. You know, so when I decided I wanted to be a chef, he went to college and did it just to sort of see, you know, what I was going through. My mum and my stepdad, I mean, all of my family, they're big kind of like cooks. You know, they love their food. And I think that, you know, for me, spending a lot of time in London, obviously working with people like Mark Hicks, you know, very focused on produce. Actually, even being in America, I mean, America for me was a massive eye opener, because it was really weird. Like some of the produce was some of the best I've ever had, and some of it was the worst I've ever had. And so I think when you go through that experience, you end up missing, you know, the stuff that you had when you were home. So when I came back from the States, the first thing I did was went to my local butcher. I went to, you know, my local deli. I went to all those guys that I used to buy the best produce from, and really started to look into the amount of amazing produce that was being produced in the area. So my boss from Sales New York, he took over Limewood, a guy called Robin Hudson, and the pig. So we came together to do the first pig, and yeah, it was kind of just a way to it was almost a way of reminiscing for me, you know, coming back to my old area, trying the food I used to eat, and then saying, well, this is amazing. Other people need to understand it. Other people need to try this. How do we do this in a way that is actually, you know, how can we make it into a philosophy? And we did that. The original menu actually at the pig was a 15-mile menu, where we said that our food was sourced from within 15 miles, but we found that it limited our radius so much, and actually if we moved it out to 25, we pretty much tripled the producers. So that's what we did.
It's really good. Like, it's funny you say that. Like, when I went back home last week, I visited the area where I was born, and they still had the local butchers there. I haven't been back to Loughborough in, I don't know, forever. And they had the best sausages. And I remember, because I never got my sausages from the supermarket because I just didn't like it. So I'd go to the butchers and have all the herbs and then make it that day. It was amazing. And I remember at Christmas, the queue would always be from the outside. People would queue for ages, and it's still there.
No, 100%. I mean, yeah, we still, I mean, Mr. Bartlett, who's the guy he's the high street butcher that supplies us here at the Pig. I mean, this year he's got, I don't know how many orders for turkeys. I mean, you've probably heard about this bird flu thing that's happening over here. It's an absolute disaster. So I don't know if there will be any turkeys at the moment, but yeah, it's crazy. But that just shows, how many people still love, the butcher. And I think for me, it's a tricky one, because I think as a sort of people, we've become very insular. A lot of people spend a lot of time on their phones. People don't really like chatting to people face to face. They'd rather do it over email. There's so many easy voice notes that you can do now. I mean, it's very easy to not actually have to talk face to face to somebody.
Yeah.
And I think the supermarket is one of those things. You can go in there with your headphones on. You don't need to chat to anybody, all the way to the back to your car, done. Whereas when you go to a butcher's shop, you can ask questions. And I'm very fond of saying, what about this? How do you cook it? What would you do? And get information. I'm a real information sharer. I love to talk to people about their experiences, and that's the one thing which a butcher will give you. He'll be able to tell you the best way to cook this piece of meat, the best thing to put with it, and you'll leave that shop probably going in there with one idea and coming out with an exciting idea that's changed your dinner plans. And I think that's what the value of a butcher shop is, and you also know where the animal's from, and how long it's been hung, and how much it weighs, and you probably only bought the amount that you need instead of buying more that you probably don't need because it's in a massive packet.
But it's funny you say that, because you do actually learn when you go there, and I'm learning because there's so many different cuts of pork that they do here. So here for like you see around the outside, you have the Iberian pork. And so you have the belly bone, you have it raw inside. It's just seared on the outside. Oh my god, it melts in your mouth.
Dark,
and
it's
so tasty. I love pork, and when you have the serrano or the jamon, oh my goodness, it's like butter on your mouth, and it's amazing. And so you go to the bodega to get your jamon or your serrano and your wine, and you always learn what to get in season. For example, so one time when I first moved here, do you have lamb? Because we have it a lot more frequently in the UK. No. We only have it for 3 months at the beginning of the year, and that's when we're going to sell it. And I'm like, oh wow, but you learn, and I think it's nice that we have the ability to learn from them, because they know the season and the produce better than what we do.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. I can't agree more. Yeah.
And so going. So you are an ambassador for Maple from Canada.
Yeah. And
you're an ambassador for other organizations as well. What's led you, when becoming an ambassador, what leads you to becoming that? Are there decisions involved? Do you just become an ambassador, or do you actually support the organization 100%?
So I'm ambassador for Maple. I also work with Ely, who are a shotgun cartridge manufacturer. They're pushing forward with stainless steel shot, which means that we can actually get game birds into places like supermarkets, because we can take the shot out, because obviously it's magnetic. So I'm pushing more towards the sustainability and the use of game. So I've actually just been nominated for an Eat Game Award.
Well done.
Actually, that's last year's one. I'm sorry. But so I've been nominated. So that's my passion for that. So I promote the usage and the ease of game. With Maple, I work a lot alongside with the Royal Academy. So I'm a fellow of the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts, and we do a lot of work with schools, with young people. We do the annual awards of excellence, where we get people in their early 20s cooking for some of the best chefs in the country to win awards. And Maple Syrup from Canada, they basically do a lot of funding for that. They put on trips so kids can go to Canada and learn all about this amazing products. And for me, when I was discussing about whether or not I became an ambassador for them, the main reason was because of their sustainability story and the fact that we know how bad refined sugar is for you. So from my point of view, they're so supportive of the next generation of British chefs and the way that they kind of work with these guys. But it's actually just an amazing product, and I fell in love with it when I was in America. I mean, the Americans, they love maple syrup on everything, but there's different levels. Maple syrup is not maple syrup. There's different levels. There's and sort of the Quebec Canadian stuff is like Rolls Royce. I mean, it's one of those things where they only tap 3 points on the tree. It's all gravity fed, so the sap comes out gravity fed. all of the way that they cook it down, they use biofuels. I mean, it's so like incredibly sustainable. And the fact is that those trees, and this is the way I think about it, those trees were planted by those people's great grandparents, so that their great grandchildren could benefit from this incredible liquid gold that comes from the ground. So, you know, when I went out there to see these sugar shacks and to meet these people, I was absolutely blown away. And so, you know, I obviously support them. I use a lot of the product itself. It's a great way to showcase things from our garden, you know, sweeten our granolas without using refined sugar. And it's just a great, or you know, organically grown product. I mean, it's fantastic. So that's why I support those. But you know, apart from that, I mean, I'm obviously a fellow of the Royal Academy, so I promote a lot of sustainability aspects through going into schools and teaching kids about healthy eating, why you should understand what it is you're eating, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's it's weird, like, you know, talking about the ambassadorships, I don't really get into them just because you know, I feel about the products. It's more like the whole story. I think that it's going back to what we're saying, you are what you eat, and it's important to understand you know, the reasons why people are doing these things to make sure you get a great product.
You made it sound really poetic when you're talking about the gravity fed like maple.
Yeah,
it's really nice. And when I do go to Canada, I always get the maple I want, because it's the whole thing of like, you can get so many, but so many of them, like honey, are just produced badly. And
well, you know that there's more honey on the planet than we can physically produce.
Oh, God.
So somewhere along, I mean, I'm not going to say it because I know where it's, but you know, they somewhere along the line, someone is pumping loads of sugar syrup into the honey production. And I don't know if you ever watched that series on Netflix called Rotten.
No,
it was about honey production, avocado production. I mean, it went on. If you haven't seen it, see if you can find it. But watch the one on honey. It's scary. It's
but
like,
that's the thing. Like, there's so much cheap honey, especially here in Spain. A lot of people have honey, but I only buy one type of honey, and I buy it from the north, and it's heather honey. It's super dark.
Yeah.
It's locally produced, only produced a little, like a small amount. It's so expensive, but oh, it's just so delicious.
It's this, you know, I mean, you summed it up, you know, it's about taste, it's about flavor. But the other thing people don't understand is that if you go into, and you know, I don't want to keep on saying if you go into, but yeah, if you go in and buy like a cheap jar of honey and it says on the back, you know, made in China or produced in China, whatever, you know, what are the benefits of eating honey? The benefits of honey is it helps with hay fever. It has, you know, antibiotics in there. It has all these amazing bits of pollen which are beneficial for you, you know, from the flora. But if you're buying something that's been imported, then it's been pasteurized, and it has to be pasteurized to get into the country. So why are you buying honey that's been pasteurized? It has no beneficial elements in it left, because they've all been pasteurized or passed out. So all you're doing is you're buying sugar, honey sugar that you're putting on your toast. You know, I mean, you know, and this goes back to the whole local producer thing. You know, you could probably go to your local, you know, farmers market, or even like somewhere like your, what's it called? You know, nursery, plant nursery. They have honey there, and buy a local honey that hasn't been pasteurized, that will be beneficial to your body and actually give you something back. I mean, it probably wouldn't even cost that much more, to be honest.
And definitely, they say, like, you know, you'll find that seasonal stuff and local stuff is cheaper than buying imported stuff because of all the everything it has to go through. And it makes sense. People don't realize that if you buy what's in that moment, in that season, you'll benefit your pocket more 100%. Than buying at the supermarket. But absolutely. I don't know where people get lost. It's really interesting.
You know what? It probably goes back to what I was saying about my Chinese, right? Being set in your ways, right? If you've got like, you know, I mean, I know some people, they've got their sort of their list of dishes that they can cook, and that's it. You know, so Monday they have that, Tuesday they have that, Wednesday they have that. And I suppose there is also an element of time, and families are busy and all that sort of stuff. But if you have your top 5 dishes that you always cook, and you cook them throughout the season, they're going to be out of season at least twice throughout a year. So, you know, it's also about being experimental, I suppose, and trying to sort of, you know, push the boundaries and have a bit of fun with food. I think that's the biggest thing, isn't it?
But it's curious to say that. So, like, when I got married a couple of years back, I got married here in Spain, and I was really worried because a lot of my family love Indian food. But I live in Granada, and there's one Indian restaurant I did not put it on the list. I was like, you're coming to Spain, have local food, you'll have better food. But we had loads of people that had intolerances, like celiacness and all that sort of stuff. So I did a list. I don't know, if you want breakfast, you go to these places where, like, you know, the toast is made in the cave, like, you know, the bread's fermented in the cave, and the jam is made from green plum. And the butter tastes like it's just been milked. It's like, so, you know, because I'm looking for a long time, and I know all the little regional places. I did the whole list of breakfast, you know, coffee shops, whatever it was. And I was really worried because a lot of my family love Indian food. And I was like, it's going to be a week without Indian food. And I was really like, what are they going to do? So here in Spain, a lot of places, there's a chain of restaurants that called Merendero. So it's like for the working man. And it's like a 3-course menu. You have your starter, your main, and your dessert. But it's local home cooked food as opposed to restaurant food. And there was a lentil stew with peppers, and, you know, it was just really homely. And I thought lentils. I went, okay, so I said to my uncle, order this. It will remind you of like a dal curry. That's what I was trying to compare it to. He loved it. He was like,
oh, really?
Like, I was like, oh my God, because I was like, are you going to enjoy it? Are you not going to enjoy it? And he loved it because it was like, and they went back to have it again because they were like, we want the lentils because it was just different. It was sweeter, and it's like you could taste it. My uncle's a proper foodie, and he's one of my favorite cooks, and he was in awe. He was like, this is amazing. And he tried, it's a typical dish from Malaga, and it's called gazpachuelo, and it's a mayonnaise stew. It's really weird. It's got potatoes, mussels, clams, seafood, and it was I was surprised he enjoyed it. I'll say that.
But I think you've just made that point. I mean, once people are sort of pushed out of their comfort zone, and they try something that's different, that they probably think, oh, I'm not going to like it, you know, but then when they like it, they're like surprise themselves. I think that's, that for me is what I kind of want to achieve when I'm doing my ambassador bits or talking to kids about food. I want people to feel uncomfortable and then feel really comfortable once they've tried it. And I think that for me, I think is where I get a lot of sort of job satisfaction. You know, I love seeing people trying stuff that you think, oh, I don't know if they're gonna like it, and then they come back and say it's the best thing I've ever had. I want it every day. You know, it's so rewarding, isn't it? It's amazing.
I think so. So I wanted to ask, like, so when you think about nostalgia, you think of seasonal recipes. What recipe do you enjoy cooking within the season, your favorite season? And does it evoke memories?
So my favorite, actually I've got quite a few, but I'd say probably one of my favorite, and I do this every year, is I go out with my kids and we go foraging, and we go and we pick porcini, or ceps or penny bun or whatever you want to call it, bolitas essentially, and we'll go out, we'll pick a few, just enough for us. We'll wash them, we'll cut them into thick chunks, and I'll sear them in oil, and then finish them with a big knob of butter, a little bit of garlic and salt and pepper, and we put that on top of hot buttered toast, and we eat them straight away. Now, a mushroom that has literally just been picked, or a porcini that's just been picked, has like a crunch to it. It's crunchy. It's like it's fresh, and it's not like soggy, and it's a completely different flavor profile and texture to anything that you'll ever try off of a shelf, right? So we do this, and when I was a kid, my dad used to take us out foraging. So we go out and we look for wild mushrooms, and we come home, and this was a dish that we used to have when we were kids. So that's one of the things which I love, and we do it every year, and it's a bit of, it's become a bit of a tradition, and it's just super simple, really easy, but you only have it one time a year. Once the mushrooms are gone, they're gone. You could buy ceps from all around the world. I mean, you can get them from Italy, Spain, France. I mean, I think you can even get them from Australia or anywhere now. I mean, you're buying truffles from Australia. So I think that, but they're not the same as the ones that are literally just picked, cut and cooked. Like that time frame is probably a matter of hours, maybe 24 hours.
Wow.
And then the mushroom changes, and you don't get that same kind of texture. So it's quite an interesting one for me, and it brings back a lot of memories of my childhood.
Oh, that's so nice. That I do like. So you talk about that. That's like something that's local to the UK.
Yep.
Do you think there are food programs now that connect us to what the UK has to offer in terms of food and the process around it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the probably the most famous one was River Cottage. I mean, River Cottage, I think, inspired a hell of a lot of people. I mean, I religiously watched it when I was younger, and I think, you know, I mean, I know Gil Mellor and Hugh Foley-Whitstall comes to the Pig on the Beach, and so, you know, it's. I think they were probably the leading light on it. I mean, now I say most British food programs kind of do focus now on British produce and sustainability, and I think it's fantastic that we're actually in that space, because back in the day it was always about, you know, French or, you know, Italian food, and so yeah, I think programs, I mean, MasterChef, you know, focus quite a lot on British stuff, although maybe not on the producer, maybe more on the style. But yeah, I think places like, you know, River Cottage and who else? I'm trying to think. I mean, Britain's. So we did what was it? I forgot the name of the program we did. Anyway, we'll edit that out. But anyway, it was a BBC program. If you Google it, what was it called? Can't remember the name of it. It was BBC. It was like best places to eat or something like that in Britain, and it was with Fred Sirrex and Chris Bavin. But you know, that obviously promoted regional, really cool regional produce and producers, and we did the thing on Panish pork on it, so it's quite cool. So it made people aware of Google it. But I think that people are proud of British food now, and I think it's really sort of becoming something that people want to see on telly. I mean, back in the day, it was all about Keith Floyd. Do you remember? And I love Keith Floyd.
I've got most of his cookbooks.
But did he ever do? I don't know if he ever did a regional British one. I think it was always France.
Everything was like the ones I've got is like Thailand, India. I think there's a French one, because I was on Tim Madden's podcast, and he was like, name a book, and I'm like, Keith Floyd, because he was one of the first cookbooks I ever bought as a child, because he was amazing. I think he had that personality that just won you over, and also I love wine, so why not?
Do you know what his last meal was?
No, can't tell me.
So his last meal, he went to Mark Hicks's place in Lyme Regis.
Okay.
And he had dinner, and sadly that night after dinner passed away. So Mark ran the Keith Floyd's Last Supper menu.
Oh no!
Down there, which it went one or two ways. Some people are a bit like, and other people are like, that's really cool.
That's amazing.
And so you could go there and have Keith Floyd's Last Supper, what he had. I mean, obviously, it wasn't a result of Mark's food.
Yeah, no, but it's the whole thing of the last. Yeah.
Hopefully, and so you know, you went there and you had, which I thought was really cool. It's like sort of homage to him.
Yeah,
and I think he would have loved that. But yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, his last meal was with Hicksy, which was actually quite nice.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
So, like, do you think, you know, all these programs and food now has enabled people to explore food identity and food ethnicity, as in, like, within themselves, to explore, like, you know, I am English and I'm going to explore something that's, you know, where I'm from, sort of thing. Like, so for example, I'm from Leicester. Leicester's famous for its cheddar and its pork pies. And so, I didn't get to have any this time, but but do you think that's, and like, you know, allow people to go, I want something that is local to where I am, and
totally. I mean, I've just come back from judging the World Cheese Awards in Newport, so I basically spent 3 days out there with. I mean, it's the 5th year that I've done it. We've got loads of friends that do it, and cheese in the UK, I think, is one of the best and fastest growing products that we have at the moment, and every year now I go and judge the World Cheese Awards, and the way that you do it, you have 60 cheeses on your table. There's a group of 3 judges, and you go through each cheese, and you know, rewind like 5 years, most of the cheeses that we were seeing, I mean, there's thousands of cheeses, you know, it's like thousands of cheeses in this big room with like hundreds of judges, and most of the time on the, you know, you can recognize Parmesan, you can recognize cheddars, you obviously recognize Camemberts, but now I'm getting to the point where I recognize the British cheeses, because we're producing, each region's producing these incredibly, really cleverly made, beautiful renditions of classic cheeses. You can now identify the British cheeses on your table because you see them day in, day out, you taste them, you know the flavor, you know the texture, you understand the profile. And for me, it's really heartwarming because this year I was on with a Swiss lady and a French lady and myself, and the cheeses which I recognised as being British cheeses, these two judges were blown away by. They were like, "Oh my god, this is amazing! Oh, it must be French. Oh, it must be Swiss." No,
Wow.
I know
Wow,
exactly where these are from. They're British. I'm not going to tell you who it is because obviously, you know, but you know, it was really kind of, it makes you very proud, I think, and it just shows how, you know, our producers and the way that we now kind of can produce products is evolving. And to be honest with you, you know, you look at places like France, like you can only produce Roquefort in Roquefort. You can only produce champagne in Champagne. You can only produce, you know, they've got all these DOPs, which is great because it keeps, but the fact of the matter is we don't have any of that. So we can make the best sparkling wine from the best area. We call it whatever we want. We can produce the best camembert and the best from any county in this country and call it whatever we want, you know, and we've sort of become this nation of producers that can make really amazing quality products, and we're not restricted by any form of kind of
protected origin.
Yeah, exactly. And it's amazing, really. It's actually that's what's kind of allowing us to actually you know, produce these amazing products, because we're not restricted and said no, you can't do that. Yes, we can. We can do anything we want, and it's actually it's really working in our favor.
That's amazing. Which actually takes me to my last two questions now. So one of them is a bit of history, nostalgia, kind of. Well, okay. So the UK has been in love with fish since the mid 1800s.
Yep.
And so many portions of fish and chips were eaten during World War II. A fun fact I never knew about, but it was true. And fish has been central to the Scottish diet and economy for centuries.
Yep.
And you know, Scotland's famous for its smoked haddock. Wales coast provides not only fish but also seaweed. To make that, is it lava bread? I think it is.
Yeah, from lava meat.
And so, how do you source your fish and seafood? And what is your favorite traditional English fish recipe?
Right. Okay. So we'll start off with where do we source our fish? So each hotel is responsible for its own fish sourcing. So so let's take a couple of the restaurants. So for example, down in Cornwall we have a lobster shack. So we use the Johnny Mert brothers. So we only use Cornish lobsters. So Cornish lobsters, and we have a charity down there called the Lobster Hatchery. The Lobster Hatchery take pregnant lobsters. They take all the eggs off. They then hatch the lobsters in the hatchery, and then when they get to an inch long, they would return them back to the estuary. We donate £1.75 for every lobster that we sell to the Lobster Hatchery. Now we'll sell 300 lobsters a day.
Wow.
So they make a good amount of money, and it's a great charity, and it's a way for us to give back to the lobster community. I've always said about Bert, Pig on the Beach. So he's an independent fisherman. He basically goes out. He mainly gets things like plaice, you know, all the local sort of south coast fish. You might get some mackerel and all those sort of bits during the summer, but he's basically very localized on that. For the bigger stuff, we tend to go to Brixham. So we work with the guys down in Devon. They obviously supply places like the Pig at Combe down to Honiton, and then on the east coast we have another set of fishermen that do that. With the smoked fish, we smoke our own smoked salmon. So we do smoked trout and smoked salmon at the Pig. We team up with local sawmills, so we go and we swap our smoked salmon for their sawdust. We only use oak, so we smoke our salmon and oak. It's my recipe. So we cure it first, we then dry it and then smoke it. So every pig has James Golding smoked salmon on the menu. And our kippers. So as a kid, we used to go to Whitby on holiday. My stepmother's uncle had a house up there. So the one thing I remember when I was walking down the hill from Whitby and smelling the kipper shack at the bottom of the hill. And so to this day, actually yesterday, I get 3 kippers a month delivered from Whitby.
No way.
Yeah, the post, and I have them like throughout the month. So I have Whitby kippers for breakfast 3 times a month. That's
love.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And then what else on the fish? What else did you ask? And my favorite fish recipe.
Yeah, that's right.
So I have 2. So one is my favorite fish recipe that I love to eat with my family. And we used to have this thing in my family where every Friday, Good Friday, we would get together as a family and have fish and chips. Now, some of my family are very healthy. It'd be the only time of year they'd have fish and chips, and my nan had to cook them, right? But everybody would have either cod or haddock, and my nan would always have skate. right? She loves skate. So she'd have it battered and then with loads of lemon juice and salt and pepper. Whereas, you know, the rest of us have salt and vinegar and, you know, and she'd hand cut the chips and everything. So for me, I'd always have had it. So my nan's home cooked fish and chips is one of them. Obviously, she's dead now. Well, I shouldn't say obviously, but unfortunately, she's dead now. So we don't have that anymore. So I actually love sole meunière. Right, sole meunière is my favourite, and not so much Dover sole. I quite like a lemon sole. So you season and flour your whole sole. You then cook it in a non-stick frying pan so you get that lovely colouring on the bottom. You flip it over and you let it cook in the pan. So you put loads of butter in there and you basically let the whole thing cook in butter. You then take it out, and with the butter that's left in the pan, you make a beurre noisette and you finish it with chopped shallots, capers, lemon juice, and lots of chopped parsley. And then you put that over the top of the fish. And it's a very classic dish, and one that I used to do at the Savoy when I was a kid. And yeah, for me, it just brings back memories. I mean, the fish is always super soft. Really, you get that lovely sort of salty, nutty kind of lemon flavour. It's just
so tasty.
So
oh my
simple,
god,
but
I'm
so
so hungry.
Yeah, that's my favourite dish. It's really classical. It's one of those classic dishes. Yeah.
I will try that. And and my final question is, what does it really mean to eat seasonal for you?
What does it mean to eat seasonal? As in what? As in
eating in the season, like how important is it for you?
Oh, I mean, it's everything. Yeah. I mean, sorry, yeah. I mean, eating in the season is probably the most important thing that you should do. One, for your body, one, for your mind, and two, for the quality of your products. I mean, you know, I've always said that something that is grown, reared, or produced on your doorstep is always going to be better than something that's sat on a plane, train, or an automobile being driven from thousands of miles away to get to your door. So, you know, and they go hand in hand. I mean, game, you know, you're going to be eating it with lovely buttered kales. You're going to be eating it with Jerusalem artichokes. You're going to be eating it with mashed potatoes. You're going to be eating it with, you know, sloes, you know, slow reduction, that sort of that fruits, gamey kind of like cabbagey, potatoey flavors. I mean, they go hand in hand. In summer, you know, fish with lemon, with butter, with, you know, lovely fresh salads, with, you know, all those really great summery, you know, fresh peas in the pod, broad beans with lamb in springtime. You know, I mean, the list goes on. It's those classic combinations which have been around for centuries, which we all know and love. You know, spring mince and lamb. You know, it's
amazing.
It's a match made in heaven, and there's a reason why those things go together. Is because there are seasonal products that are around at the same time. You know, samphire and fish. Samphire, you should only use it for 1 month in my mind, because that's only when it's good. But you know, you go all around the world and you'll be sitting in a restaurant in December and they've got samphire and some fish on the menu. You go, well, where's this come from? Because there's no possible way it's from here. And you eat it, it's all woody. And then you go, and then someone goes, oh, I wonder why the samphire is so woody. Well, because it's probably been grown in Israel, and you're now sitting in, you know, somewhere,
Germany or somewhere like that. Yeah.
You know, and you wonder why it's woody. Well, because it's, you know, it's not the season to be eating it. And so, you know, I think that within the world of food, there's natural marriages within classic dishes which are there for a reason. And there's certain times of year that you should be eating those dishes. I mean, things like fish, you know, we talk about fish, you know, that you shouldn't be eating fish when it's spawning because there's not enough meat on it. You know, the roe is too big. You know, don't eat fish when it's spawning. You know, mussels, you know, everybody wants to eat mussels in the summer. And you get them and they're tiny and they go, why are the mussels so small? Yeah, because you shouldn't really eat lots of mussels in the summer. You know, eat them in the spring or eat them in the autumn. That's when, but because, you know, we have this love of shellfish in the summer, you know, it happens. And it's tricky because I think, you know, people don't necessarily think about the seasons when they eat. But as chefs and as people who cook for people, I think it's important that you kind of think about it yourself and you make sure that you're actually doing seasonal dishes, because that's why it's, you know, that's why they're there. I mean, it's
true.
I mean, it's a great way to eat, and I'm a firm believer that, like I said, you are what you eat, and if you can eat it as fresh and as good as it is in that season, then it's always going to be a winner.
Definitely, but I think as well, when you are eating in the seasons, people don't realize there's also health aspects towards it as well.
100%.
Like, you know, like raspberries in the summer, because the sun, the vitamin C, it helps to circulate through your body. It's the same with like meat and fish. There's a reason why you have it in seasons, because of whatever, I don't know, illness is going around or germs. Those products are there to help fight that. But if you're having it all year round, it's not A, it's not good for your body, and B, you're not having it at its sweetest, like its ripest moment.
Exactly.
And I think it's a shame.
I have 3 products that I do a taste test on. Actually, four. Right. So I do my sweet corn test. This is with my apprentices. So I've got 48 chef apprentices across our hotels, right? And they're all under the age of 25. And I do taste tests with them, right? So we do sweet corn, right? So I get sweet corn that's been pre-packaged in a plastic packet, and sweet corn that's fresh from our local producer. And you try it side by side. One will be the sweetest thing you've ever eaten, the one will be the starchiest thing you've ever eaten. Strawberries in December to strawberries in the summer. I'm sorry, I mean, it's a no-brainer. Anybody who's got strawberries on their menu in December shouldn't really eat a restaurant, in my book. And then asparagus from Peru, which is where most of the asparagus comes from, out of the British season, compared to a spear of asparagus from a local asparagus farm in the UK, is completely night and day. I mean, I would say that if you don't like asparagus, then eat the stuff from Peru, because it's not going to be as strong as the British stuff. But if you don't mind that, and you're happy with the flavour over the sort of issue of that, then it's all about that flavour, isn't it? It's about that grassy, sweet kind of, you know, I love it with a bit of hollandaise sauce or some lemon butter, or even just with a really good amount of salt and pepper. I just love it really basic. Like my mates used to do it with duck eggs, which I used to like, but I prefer it just really natural. And then the other thing that we did this year, which wasn't on the list, but I've added it on, is apples. So this year, so I went to the Manoir and I was chatting to Raymond Blanc, and I took my daughter wants to be a chef, so she went and did a day with Benoit, the pastry chef in the kitchen there. And on the way out, I was chatting to Raymond Blanc. He said, "Here's one of my favourite apples. I want you to have it." I said, "Oh, thank you very much." So I'm driving home, and I'm eating this apple. I think, God, this is bloody amazing. So I got back to the pig, and I went down to the garden, and we've probably got about 20 different varieties of apple, and I just took an apple from each tree and came up, and we did an apple test or tasting on the parson at the pig. And I'll tell you what, incredible. Like from honey to citrus to just intense, like sort of apple skin flavor, you know, that almost like sorry flavor, to like pappy kind of cotton wool, you know. I mean, that was like, forget that, we don't want that one, to like this beautiful sort of like almost vanilla-y flavor. I mean, honestly, the flavors and the textures of these different varieties, when you put them side by side, you actually are then able to really appreciate what each apple, one, can be used for, and two, what, you know, results you will get from using that apple. I mean, one of them, I just said, we need to chop this up and just put it out for people to eat. So now what we do is we have our windfall apples, where we just put them out and people can just help themselves, you know. And it's just, they're perfectly good apples, but they've obviously fallen off the tree. We washed them and put them out, and amazing. I mean, this year's been really good for fruit. We've had a couple of years where it's not as good, but honestly, I'm going to go down the garden a minute and get an apple.
No, you made me hungry. Like I'm so hungry with all your like recipes. I'm like, oh my goodness.
I'm going to go and do a video now of the apples down in the garden, put it on Instagram.
And I'm going to be like, oh, feed and meat. But because I think like I actually fell out of love with apples. But when I went to the north, like apple in Asturias is super famous. And I always loved it stewed with cinnamon sticks. It was it's something else.
Crumble,
crumble in custard always. But it's nice to like enjoy that love of apple again, because my grandma used to give me the really the bright red apples that are so beautiful from Snow White. I forgot the name of it now. Three times a day. Three times a day, and sadly, I don't have to eat it anymore. But it made me fall out of love with apples, which is a shame. I love all my puddings. But anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure having you today on the Naughty Bites podcast. Thank you so much for coming with me, and it's been so insightful, and I'm like hungry for your recipes.
I've had a lovely time. No, absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
It's been great.
Bye.
Take care.